Hello, and welcome to the UnToxic Boss podcast, where leadership meets empathy and productivity meets compassion. I am your host, Jeannine K. Brown, and each week we will dive into the world of effective leadership without toxicity. I'm here to help equip you with the tools, insights, and stories to transform your leadership style, foster a healthy work environment, and create a space where everyone feels valued and heard. So grab your notebook, get comfortable, and learn to stop being a jerk at work. Welcome to the UnToxic Boss. We're going to be talking about navigating burnout in the workplace, causes and solutions. We're going to take a deep dive into one of the most pervasive challenges facing today's workforce, and that is burnout. We'll explore, this multifaceted nature of burnout, uncovering its roots and its impact on individuals and organizations, and most importantly, the pathways to overcome it. So I'm going to bring our guest on. She is an amazing expert in all things organizations and trying to help these companies and their employees get themselves together. So welcome our guest, Miss Latisha B. Russel, and she is so amazing. Y'all gonna love her as just like I do. I think it was like love at first sight. We had these kindred spirits and this desire because we're both so vested in the nature and livelihood of other people. So it was just like this immediate connection, and I just find it an honor to call her friend. So welcome to the show, Latisha.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited about what we're going to talk about today.
Well, tell everybody about you and what you do and, why you here.
Yeah. So I am Latisha B. Russel. I am an emotional wellness coach, consultant, HR consultant, and I really help organizations as well as individuals really navigate all things around emotional wellness, right? What does it look like? How do those things impact productivity and retention? And do they work by themselves, or do they truly work and impact each other? And so that is a little bit about what I do. So definitely super excited to be here.
We've had these shows on the UnToxic Boss, and I keep saying I might end up with no friends in the HR space.
Don't do it.
I don't want to blame it all on HR, but I really do want to see more HR organizations be a little bit more, I'm going to even use the word confrontational and combative, like out there really fighting for the well-being of the employees versus protecting the companies. And I think that is why, today, as we tackle this topic that's so dear to both of our hearts related to burnout in the workplace, because it's this phenomenon that's becoming increasingly prevalent in today's fast-paced work environment, and one that kind of deeply impacts what we do, right? Retention, productivity, and then well-being. And I want to confess, I'm going to be the first one to confess and raise my hand. I feel a little burned out. I realized yesterday in a conversation with one of my close friends that I was telling him, I was like, you know what? I have not worked. I worked all during the holiday season, even the weeks of those holidays. Yes, every single one, even the ones I don't celebrate.
I get it.
I was working so much. What is happening to us, Latisha? I feel like we take on stress and burnout and wear it as a badge of honor. And that's kind of toxic.
It is. I always say you have to find, and even when you do, but finding that why. And when you get grounded in that why, sometimes things are revealed to you. And so you feel like, because we've had these conversations, right? Like, I'm tired. But what do? We keep going, right? We're in this grind mode. And the excuse that I use, because a lot of times I'll talk and I'm like, but I'm talking to myself. I know I'm talking to myself, is I'm trying to set up my family so that they don't have to do what I'm doing, right? I want to make sure and I find that that's just an excuse, Latisha. Really? That's an excuse. Stop telling yourself that. And so we are really still trying to navigate it. I think for me, and I don't want to get too deep because I know you got some questions.
No, let's just flow. We're talking about burnout. We're going to flow in this conversation. Yeah. So say what you got to say. Get our people together.
Yes. I have so many things to say. You're right. Let's normalize in organizations being able to talk about the things that we are going through. And you will hear me say so many times that we were told that vulnerability and strength couldn't reside in the same lane, but they absolutely can. So let's normalize having a conversation with our people. Let's normalize talking about it. And for me, with the reason that I think I go so much is it does come from trauma. And when I heard you talk about the conversation that you had with your friend, it started young for me, right? I was told I wouldn't amount to anything. I was told that I couldn't do. So I always have this mindset now that I'm going to show you better than I'm going to tell you, right? You go see my name, you go see that, I've done all of the things. And so I was constantly in this battle of trying to prove what I can do, right? Trying to prove that I can show up in spaces that I was told I couldn't do. I was always in this space of I'm going to try to reach this next level and next place in my life, but I was really losing myself. And
Yeah.
so it does come from trauma, and we don't recognize that because we don't sit still long enough, right, to recognize it. We keep moving.
I find that so interesting, right? That so many people, and I didn't really have words for it. So I think you've given me and our listeners and our viewers today words for, I've been trying to outperform all the negative things that I heard about myself, or that maybe from other people, or maybe even things I told myself.
Yeah.
That I couldn't do, that I wasn't enough. And, I use this thing, I say this too, I'm going to show you better than I can tell you. I
Absolutely.
was like, oh, so I'm not alone.
Not
I
at
got
all.
that. I mean, and I was fortunate to have like a great community as a kid, and I was an athlete, and, so always being cheered on. But I think I took the opposite of someone saying I wasn't going to be enough. I feel like I have to keep that same level of
Keep showing up.
performance as
Mhm.
I did when I was a student athlete, and when I was, getting awards. And just, I think we have these messages around performance, and we see taking a break as a weakness.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
really, I want to help normalize that as well. But let's take a step back, because we done jumped all the way in
I know,
to
right?
the middle
Organic
of the circle.
conversation.
We are in, like, we're going 55 miles an hour in a 35. So let's slow down and let's go back. And can you define for us and give us some language around what is burnout?
Yeah. So, some people view burnout in as so many different things. And before I give you the definition, I'm going to say burnout is that state in which you have to truly listen to your body and what it's telling you. And so when you are feeling kind of, okay, I got this stop sign, I'm feeling this way, that means you need to slow down and put some boundaries in place. So ultimately, when I think about burnout, it's really that state of just emotional and physical and mental exhaustion. It's that thing that you are feeling. And when your body starts to tell you slow down, but then we keep going. It's that feeling of just feeling fatigue, right? And we're like, oh, I'm just tired. You find those excuses, right? I'm just tired because I've been going today. I just need to sit down for a moment. And so it's really that emotional state when you feel like I have taken on so much and your body starts to feel it, right? You're no longer effective as you normally are. You're not able to produce or be as productive as you normally are. And so it's that state of truly feeling the emotional wear down of your body.
Oh, I like that. So if I were to summarize that, I guess you said emotional, but I think burnout could also be like characterized by the emotional, physical, and mental
It
exhaustion
is.
from
It
this
is.
prolonged stress.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So that's pretty much what you've told us. And it's marked by like these feelings of reduced productivity or loss of personal identity, reduced achievement, right? Because what I found this week for me, it was like taking me so long to do things that shouldn't take me as long as it took me to do, or I didn't want to do it. Or by the
Yes.
time I finished all my meetings and phone calls, I didn't want to do the real work. And that's how I know. So that's my signal for burnout. What's your signal? Like what's happening in your life when you realize, "Oop, I didn't hit the wall, I'm burned out."
It's a lot of the same, right? It is, I am just mentally and emotionally and physically drained. And just so that you know, Jeannine, your screen will go black sometimes. I can see you and I can hear you. Just make sure, I wanted to make sure you knew. But it's it's technology, y'all. But it's a
Technology.
lot of the same. I'm tired, I'm exhausted. I feel like I'm bouncing around in so many different places and I can't just focus on one thing. And for me, that's when I truly know. And if I can share kind of that personal story of something that happened to me when I realized, like, okay, I got to change something here. Like I'm really burned out. And I remember it was a Saturday, and I've shared this story before, but it was a Saturday morning, and my 9-year-old had come into the room, and she was like, "Mommy, I'm hungry." And I was like, "Okay." Like I just knew it was 6:30, 7 o'clock, and I was like, "All right, baby, I'm gonna get you something to eat in a little bit." And it wasn't until she came in the room, maybe the second or the third time, and told me again. And I was like, okay, look at my phone and what time it is. And she told me what time it was. And she was like, 10 o'clock. I was like, ooh. It's 10 o'clock.
All right
And
now, don't
so,
have us calling family and
right,
child
I
and
know,
protective
right?
services. You ain't feeding the babies over there.
Like, come and get these. I was like, that's why you hungry. But I couldn't get up. Even then, I could not get up. And that's when I knew something has to change, because that Saturday, oh, I laid in bed. I was just like, I couldn't even get up if I wanted to. And that was my sign. But I had gotten those small signals ahead of that, but I kept pushing through, right? I just kept doing the things. But that was my sign that I needed to make some changes.
Oh. So what's the difference, or is there a difference between burnout and this typical workplace stress and
Yeah.
life stress, right? We got these things we have to do.
Yeah.
Is it the workplace that's causing the burnout? Like, how do we differentiate the two that, okay, I'm in busy season, it's just a busy time, versus I'm completely drained and burned out?
Yeah, there is a difference, right? Sometimes they go hand in hand, and sometimes you can't tell the difference of if I'm stressed or if I'm burned out. But what I'll say is, with stress, you will find, busy seasons. And what I'll say right now, a lot of organizations might be going through merit or performance reviews and the things that you have really tight deadlines on. And so you have the pressure of producing and getting things done. But that stress at some point, that's going to be relieved, because that busy season, right, might just kind of taper off some. And so it is the high demands of this expectation of things that are needing to be done. Whereas burnout, like we said earlier, it's just that fatigue and the physical and the mental as well as the emotional fatigue of it all. But do they go hand in hand? Yeah, they absolutely can. And they might appear as some of the same symptoms per se, but I think there, again, there are some differences as well as some similarities related to it.
So, what I found, and I'm gonna list a couple of things that I see happening in workplaces, both things that I experienced when I worked. I hope none of my employees feel this way. But these are some of the things that I see. So we have people who feel like they have a lack of control or boundaries at work, unclear job expectations, long hours, stress-induced deadlines, dysfunctional workplace dynamics. So and that could be interpersonal relationships, colleagues that you don't get along with, leadership that is, toxic, in how they interact with staff and employees, extremes of activities, right? All these different projects going on at the same time, and a lack of social support. Now, some people thrive off of that, but I do think that can lead to burnout too. So with all of these things happening in the organization, what can companies do and leaders do to help their employees manage all of this so that they don't get to a place of burnout? So what kind of things have you helped clients, kind of systems put in place to avoid this when all of these things that I listed are going on?
I was sitting here kind of jotting down some of the things that you noted, because it was a list, and it's a relevant list. But what I'm going to say is, I want to say it's easy, Jeannine. This is what you do. But the thing that I'm going to say is the thing that organizations and people, leaders, don't do. And it's simple. It's communicate. We shy away from the communication piece. We shy away from having the conversations. We shy away from simply saying, how can I support you? We are in this space and day and age where we've got to move, right? We've got to turn out various things and do so much before this particular deadline that we forget that our people are the folks that are running the show when it comes to some of those things. And so we miss the mark in just simply saying, is there anything I can do? How many times have your leaders stepped into a one-on-one with you and you can't just have a general organic conversation? We go right into business. So tell me what's on your list. What do you need to get done today? Where are you with meeting this expectation and or this deadline? And I'm gonna ruffle some feathers, but we missed the mark. I had a situation where a leader asked me, hey, this employee sent me a message and they need to take 2 weeks off, but they didn't give me a reason. What do? I need to have a conversation. And I said, have you asked some questions? Have you just said, hey, this is unlike you? Do you need any? Right? And so we are so afraid to just have the conversation. I promise you, if you have the conversation and simply recognize, those employees will be like, man, my leader cares. And then the other thing is being empathetic. Empathy. Leaders should have empathy. It's not difficult. And I get that for some, it's not easy. But the minute you start to kind of tap into that, I think you see a shift in your organization and in your people.
these just seem like really simple human things, right?
Mhm, mhm,
To do,
it is.
and I think we, even as respondents to questions, have become so, like, we're so routine. I say, hey, how you doing? And you say,
I'm fine.
okay. We don't ask people like, how are you really doing?
But we don't take it a step further by digging deep. And I think there is this difference between, you know, digging deep or asking questions and being intrusive. You know when to just simply back off and say, I understand you might not want to talk about it, but I'm here should you need me. And that is the thing that leaders do not do. And at some point, we've got to pause and ask ourselves, better yet, we have to pause and ask our associates, what do you need?
I think it's also interesting, or we need to do it long before they have a personal life issue, right? It should
Yeah.
be our standard way of interacting with the people on our teams and that report to us and that we work with, even as peers, is that we spend more time together connecting and socializing. A client called last night, and it was after hours, and he was just checking in, and he was like, oh, our team had an outing tonight. And I was like, oh, y'all doing life together? And he was like, yeah. I said that was one of their goals. So when we did our work with them, one of the goals and one of the things that came out of our team building was they wanted to do more life together, celebrating, and they
Yeah.
wanted to spend more time together, not talking about work. And it's actually helping them with communication. It's helping
Yes.
them learn about each other. It's helping them deal with conflict, address issues quicker and more direct and more honest and open with one another. All the things that I promised them would happen if that
Yep.
was something they did. And I didn't tell them y'all need to spend more time together. It came out of
Hey, look.
all the team building we have been
Yeah.
doing over the 2 days. And it makes a difference because it's hard for me to come to you as my leader and tell you, oh, my cousin is sick or my family member is sick or this is happening. Instead, I'm trying to cover. I'm trying to
Absolutely.
find ways so I can work a little but be away. But if I'm spending time with you and I say, hey, you know what? My mother has this doctor's appointment and I need to go. I know that we got a lot going on right now. It would be no question, right? Because you probably done heard about my mom before and met her and all of these things.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I'm glad that you shared that because I think that's an essential part. So, like, when did we stop being, or why maybe, a work family and more of an assembly line?
Yeah, so I think a few things. So I want to go back to something you said, and I just have one comment to that. You mentioned team building. Let's do more of that, right? Stop trying to just check the box and truly do it and pour into it. Because those are, I think, in some cases, leaders think, let me just throw money at my employees and that's what they want. But reality is they want to feel seen and heard and understood more than money most times. And so give them that opportunity versus not just trying to check the box. And so when did it start? I think was your question, right?
Yeah, let me interject this one thing. My mother used to always talk about her work family. And I knew just by how she talked about the people and the work and the things that they did. And they didn't spend a significant amount of personal time together socially because all of them were raising a family.
Right.
But now people are so averse to that. And I'm wondering, does that play into workplace burnout?
Yeah, so I think a couple things here. We're at a different generation now, right? You got different leaders than you had many years back when our parents were growing up. And so different generations do different things. And so, again, that lends to getting to know your workforce, because I do think that plays a role in that work family piece. The other thing that I'll say is we stopped getting creative. And what I mean by that is, once the pandemic hit, most folks began to have this flexible work environment and or they're home now and they're not necessarily in the office where, man, I'm forced to see people every day and I can do the team building and doing things that bring our teams together. But now leaders get lazy, right? They don't want to put the work in. And it's easy to hop on Zoom or whatever your platform is and still put in the work to say, okay, like we're still going to do some fun things. Let's figure it out. And so I think part of it is generations. And I also think part of it is once many leaders sent their associates home, it became kind of your day-to-day. We have a call between 8 and 9, 9 to 10, and we just don't also do the work to figure out how do we continue to get to know our folks and do some team building activities.
Yeah, I agree. You know, one thing I think people can do, I'm going to throw out an idea. So if you're a people leader, or even if you're on a team, because you can make suggestions of how your team operates, connects, and checks on each other's well-being. You can use a simple polling system and
Absolutely.
randomly, like using a simple free polling tool that goes to people's cell phones or pops up in and ping everybody and do a check-in and have them use either emojis like the smiley faces, like, how are you doing today? And they can have the big smiles, the straight lines, the frowns, you know, whatever. Or you could just say, hey, how you doing? Do you need a break? Or checking in on people's like, hey, have you taken a break today? Maybe you should go out and go for a walk. That's one of the things that I tell a lot of my clients. So
yeah, look, I have that church finger like.
Yes. So you give us, so those are some of mine, like the polling of your team, getting outside and going for a walk. Like, so take, polling your team to kind of check the barometer, the temperature of how everybody's doing. And then sometimes just getting outside, because I don't think we get enough sun. So we ain't getting that vitamin D, and that's a happy vitamin. What are some other things that you can do or that you've done with your clients to help them address, identify burnout in the workplace?
Yeah, you said one of them. And that's when I put the church finger up, because I was like, oh, that's so important. Think about your day and how your day is set up. And in a lot of instances, we are tethered to our laptops, right? Well, we have meetings back to back. But how about we have meetings while we walk, right? Who's to say we can't put on our headphones and just have meetings while we walk? And so maybe you establish like a no meeting Friday, or a day where meetings, if you need to get out and walk around, then you do that. I think there is this level of expectation that you've constantly got to prove that you're working by that green light being on, right? It's like, let me make sure this employee is working. And so I think some of those are various things that you can do. The other thing is put boundaries in place. Right? Do you really have boundaries in place where you are strategic and intentional about the fact that, yes, I have a day full of meetings, but I am going to carve out 30 minutes or an hour to say, this is my lunch period. And you do whatever it is that you need to do within that hour or 30 minutes of time frame. But it's going to mean you have to establish boundaries. And if you don't put your own boundaries in place, nobody else is going to abide by the boundaries that you have.
Ooh, what? Because if we don't do it, why in the world would someone else? If we don't respect our own boundaries, we can't really expect other people to do that. Okay, I got a little hallelujah happy on that one. Anything else that you would suggest to our listeners?
The other thing that I would suggest is state what you want and need. Stop assuming that people should read your mind and know what you desire and what you need. Yes, in the workplace. And we get caught up in, oh my goodness, I can't say this, and I don't know what my leader is going to say. State what you need and don't shy away from it, right? When that person says, how can I support you, or what do you need? How dare you say, I'm okay, I'm good. Stop it. And just simply state what you need. And I'm sorry, I'm going to say this because, I'm going to say it. It's like that relationship, right? Say what you need. It's the same thing at work. And so I have to say that because it's so important. So many times we are so afraid to share what's on our mind or to show up because we're afraid that other people will talk about us or judge us or not, they'll put us in this box or they'll stop asking, whatever it is. Stop being afraid and show up 100% of the time in whatever your need is. And so those are a few of the things that I would mention.
I think a lot of people are afraid to open up,
Absolutely.
and using the word need. So do you think that because we're afraid of retaliation, that could be feeding into performance, which leads to burnout?
It does. Absolutely. There is this fear of retaliation, if so, but let me ask you this. And by no means when I say various things, I'm saying it's easy, because it's not. But where do you start, right? At some point, you've got to put one foot in front of the other and start somewhere. And so what I'll say to you is, does that organization and or that leader still align with your values? And at some point, you've got to say, my values and my needs are more important than, this thing, right? And I'm not saying that you don't keep or move forward with the job because you need it to pay bills, all of the things. But at some point, we lose ourselves because we are trying so hard to press or not ruffle feathers of other people. But at some point, you've got to say, what are my core values, right? And if this job or this leader does not align with my core values, then I need to make some hard decisions, right? And so that's what I would say to that. Absolutely, those things happen where your leaders might, say, we can't ask Latisha if she could do X, Y, and Z. Yes, we have those fears, and I had them at one point too. But I've had to make some really hard decisions because stress will kill you. Let's just be really honest. And so you have to ask yourself, what's important for you? And you also have to ask yourself, what is it costing you not to do that thing and say no or challenge that person?
There is definitely an opportunity cost to working in these companies where maybe it's not toxic from an interpersonal relationship, but maybe the pressures to perform and the work and the expectations and the fear of speaking up could be causing all of these things. Like, at the top of the show, when I mentioned the conversation I was having with a colleague, the stress was so bad that it was literally deteriorating her health. And I think that is, and unfortunately, the American workforce, we've gotten so off course around what is important and what the real opportunity costs are. Right? Companies are willing to sacrifice people, their brand of their organization for the sake of profits. And I think we've completely gotten it wrong. One of the things I admired when I was working with a global team, I admired the folks in Europe so much. I wanted to move to Europe, and I don't like cold weather like that.
No.
When they say they are out of the office, they are out,
they out
of the office. When they say they are on vacation, like they get holiday. And I was a little jealous. Like we didn't get the same sort of benefits when it came to holiday. Like I still got my 6 weeks of vacation, but I couldn't take 4 consecutive weeks. Like I couldn't, I'm gonna put that in air quotes. Like I couldn't they would take their 2 months of leave and don't have a baby. Don't be pregnant.
When I really heard about what they get when they have kids, I was just like, I'm in the wrong
and those are I'm thinking, and they're not worried about, the company's not going to meet its financial goals. I tell you, people who can work, because burnout also causes anxiety and it causes tension, right? So, but studies show that when people can work from a place of calmness, they actually contribute more. They can take on more capacity. They're more innovative. They're more creative.
They're more productive. It decreases retention, right? And people they have a desire to want to continue to work.
Exactly. And so that's what we need.
We spoke about in Europe, right? When you're off, be off. And we don't do that. We don't put our out of office on because it's like, okay, I don't want to miss this client or I don't want to miss this call for whatever reason. And you have to ask yourself, because this is what causes burnout and stress. But you have to ask yourself the pressure that you have. Are you putting that pressure on yourself or are others putting it on? And a lot of times we're putting that pressure on ourselves, right? Because we're wanting to overcommit and we're wanting to extend ourselves. And so I will challenge you to ask, is this truly pressure that I'm putting on myself, or if it's pressure that I'm putting on somebody else or somebody else is putting on me? I'm sorry.
Yeah. We do have these conversations we make up in our head and they become our reality about, my boss is expecting this or they're expecting this. And I think so many people are guilty of that. I know you've given us some things about boundaries and things. So over the weekend or this week, whenever you're listening to this show, Tisha, what can people do? What are some of the first things they should do when they're trying to plan their way and dig their way out of burnout?
Before I go there, I want to say one thing, and it's really this challenge and this question, because this is where I want you to really think about it. And that is, who are you outside of your career? Who are you outside of your title? And so we spend so much time chasing that title and chasing this career. And at the end of it all, we've lost ourselves and we don't know who we are right at our core. And so I challenge you to do some work, some self-work, and ask that very pivotal question.
You know what? I'm glad you brought that up, because outside of your title, I think it's all of our titles. Several years ago, I wrote a blog, and I think it's still out on LinkedIn, about who am I? And it was shortly after my grandmother passed. And I was like, who am I if I'm not a granddaughter? right? It was such a big part of my identity, both the reciprocal love, right? How I got to love on her, the love that she gave to me, especially growing up. But I think we should examine it. Who are you outside of being a mother, a father, a sister, a daughter, right? And I had to sit back and say, if I didn't have any of these titles, who is Jeannine? Right. And really, it was like, who am I? What do I really enjoy? How do I see the world? If no one else had an influence or impact on me before and I could go back to day one of my life, who could I be? And I think that's a really big exercise. And it's very challenging for people because we do it with our clients and our coaching that are in our coaching programs, and they struggle with
because they've never done it. They've never been challenged to do it.
And they've never thought about it. Every time they take on something new, their sibling has a kid. I'm auntie, I'm uncle, and they take on a responsibility that comes with doing.
It's not an easy thing, right? I jokingly said, but it's true. Sometimes I love the podcast, and I love, even when I'm going through various coaching sessions with my clients, they're exercises that I do for myself. And so I think the first thing is really sitting still, right? Being able to sit still and be. And we find that we move all the time. And so when you find that you are consistently moving, what are you running from? So just be. And that would be the first thing. The next thing, I talked about it. And it is, if you've never done it before, set boundaries. You've got to be able to say, these are my boundaries and or my non-negotiables. And if you cannot respect my boundaries, then you have to ask yourself some very difficult questions, right? And sometimes that means you've got to remove people out of your circle that no longer serve you. And whether that's in the personal space, whether that's in the professional space. And then the last thing I'm going to say is give yourself some grace this weekend and do some self-care. Do some self-care, even if you've got to schedule it. Take a moment to just give yourself some space to just allow somebody to pour into you, right? I'm sure many of you continually pour into other people, but when was the last time that you've poured into you?
Ooh, pour into yourself. Well, I just want to thank you so much for being a guest here on the UnToxic Boss, as we talk about, the causes and solutions to burnout, both in the workplace and just in our lives from all the doing that we do. So I'm going to join you on this challenge. Y'all sit still, be still, and be quiet. I think it's so important. Sometimes we got to turn the TV off, the music off, and just settle into our bodies. So tell everyone how they can connect with you and how they can work with you.
Yes. Again, Latisha B. Russel. You can find me on LinkedIn at Latisha B. Russel, all platforms, actually, Latisha B. Russel. My website is www.latishabrussel.com. And head on over, right? Connect with me. I'd love to connect with you as an individual to help you navigate this as well as your organization.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And we'll see you here again next week. We want to introduce you a resource that we know that will impact your life and your career. It's a book, Unstuck and Unstoppable. It is the ultimate guide to overcoming obstacles and achieving your goals. With practical tips and inspiring stories, the book will help you leverage your value, increase your visibility, and gain recognition to accelerate your career. Take action towards getting the career that you deserve. This book was named Best Career Book of 2022. Get your copy anywhere you buy books, either on Amazon or at our website at unstuckandunstoppablebook.com. Thank you for joining the UnToxic Boss podcast today. We are here and on a mission to help people stop being a jerk at work. We'll see you here again next week.